The offensive line is really kind of a one-man position battle, I feel like, at this point, because Florida State brought in 4 super seniors, essentially. I don't know that Medley is that old, but 3 of the guys
Medley may be the oldest of all.
Okay, so Medley
he's going into his 7th season.
My goodness. Okay, so just like Luke Pettibone in the middle, just like Micah Pettis, just like Gunnar Hansen, you've got old dudes leading the way and one probable interior spot that's opening up for grabs. But there are a couple of favorites there too, Ira. So where is the intrigue at the offensive line discussion in the offseason for you?
Well, I think the intrigue is, I'm sure a lot of people that just heard you say that got a little PTSD from last year, when the talking point was how Florida State had the oldest offensive line in the country. They had a zillion combined starts. And, and people are sitting here saying, well, wait a minute. We heard this last year. That's why that offensive line was going to be so good. I think the difference here is that offensive line was pretty much all guys. They brought in a couple of transfers that they were hoping to really step in and help, including a couple of the ones that we're going to talk about here. But for the most part, the bulk of it was guys who have been in this system for the last 4 or 5 years. Talking about Maurice Smith, Robert Scott, Darius Washington, Jeremiah Byers had been here for a couple of years at that point. So the feeling was that group was going to be the nucleus, and they did have a ton of starts. But all of those starts came at Florida State. All those starts came under Alex Atkins, and then it was a disaster. It clearly was not what they expected it to be, and it really, I feel like, was the downfall of the team, because once they couldn't run the ball, DJ was done. They didn't have good enough receivers to overcome that, especially when you got Destin Hill was hurt and a couple other guys were banged up. So it was just a perfect storm. But to me, it all really crumbled when they couldn't run the football with that offensive line. The difference here is these are all guys that started for multiple years at pretty good programs, or you can make a case good offenses. Luke Pettibone he started at Wake Forest for over 2 years, and you could say, well, Wake Forest isn't great. But that offense was very good, and he literally, he got more praise than anybody, maybe anybody on the entire offense this spring. Gus Malzahn, Mike Norvell, the coaching staff, they love him, how smart he is, how tough he is. I was talking to somebody on the staff, and they were saying, listen, he's not the biggest, strongest dude in the world, but you're in for a fight if you line up across him, and comes from a football family. So you're going to get, I think, a very honest day's work every time out of Luke Pettibone, and that's what you're asking for, somebody who's going to get in there and fight. Pettis and Hansen started, at high levels of college football. They started in the SEC for multiple years. Adrian Medley, the guy you mentioned, is from UCF, played in Gus Malzahn's offense for the last 3 or 4 years, and he's a 7th-year senior. He's probably, to me, the biggest question mark, because he did have a lot of injuries. The reason he is in his 7th year of college football is, well, part of it's because he came in back in COVID times, but also part of it is because he did have a lot of injuries. He's really only played the last couple of years. So you'll need him to stay healthy. But to me, the fact that all those guys not only have started for multiple years, but they've done it at other places, I feel like is a good sign.
Yeah, and there's a track record too, looking at their Pro Football Focus, which I know. But there's a lot of data for these kids, multiple seasons worth of data. So if you've got different graders across, that's why I think the more data you have, the more reliable the data is. It's a good size sample. Gunnar, 35 starts, 27 at left tackle. Performed well at times against top flight competition. Not always. He was a little uneven. Right. But Ira, when they faced teams that had like talent or teams that had talent below what Vandy had when he played offensive line for them, he would grade out very, very well in those situations. And I think and the case was the same for Pettis. The case was the same for Medley. If you could get a group here that when they play teams they should beat, at least reputationally long-term, if you're thinking about Florida State versus other teams in the ACC, and they can handle at least that much, what a night and day experience that would be for Florida State fans.
Yeah, I think the big thing is you want a fighting chance. You don't need a guy. Gunnar Hansen. If Gunnar Hansen had a superstar at Vandy against SEC defensive ends every week, he probably wouldn't have been on the market. He would have been in the NFL. So, you're kind of trying to find that sweet spot between a guy who's got a lot of experience, has played against good opponents, knows what that looks like, and also would be willing to stay in college for another year. because, he was not necessarily a big time pro prospect after last season. So I think they feel like they've done that. And at the end of the day, this does not need to be, I don't believe, an unbelievable offensive line, because you do have a Tommy Castellanos in the backfield and some talented running backs, especially a couple of the ones that are arriving right now this summer, who are really going to help out that offensive line. Because again, last year it was the marriage of not just having an offensive line that wasn't very good and was banged up, but also a quarterback who couldn't do anything with his legs to be a threat, to not only make plays with his legs, but to just get teams to back off. I mean, I think that was the thing. If I said, if Mike Norvell and Alex Atkins really misevaluated something last year, well, they certainly misevaluated a lot of things last year. But one of the big things I think they misevaluated is how teams would play them if they didn't have Jordan Travis back there. And when you have Jordan Travis back there, man, it changes how those teams how they act in every situation, run downs and pass downs. And so when you didn't have that anymore, now your offensive line has to play a more straight up game, a more legitimate man-on-man game, and they couldn't do it. This group kind of goes back to having that dynamic quarterback, and they'll have that advantage. So I don't need this offensive line to be elite. You just need them to be good and competent and fight and give these offensive guys a chance.
Well, and Gus Malzahn's offense, too, is an offensive lineman's best friend in a lot of ways. Number one, they do want to run the ball. That's the basics. Number two, they try to confuse you. So, a lot about what an offensive line will face in the defensive front, there might be hesitation for a half a step. And we know from watching Florida State defensively when they struggled the last couple of years, like when you hyper-focus on your own side, that hesitation can mean the difference between a gain of 1 and a gain of 4. And so this is, again, Gus is going to be putting these guys in a situation where if you're an offensive lineman, this is the scheme that you want to play. I mean, you're going to be running the ball 65% of the time. Everything's kind of straight ahead. And you could hear that in the interviews that we heard from either the newcomer series when these guys first got on campus, Ira, or during spring camp. These guys are excited to play in this scheme. They might have had to get up to speed, literally, with the speed of the scheme, but they're very excited to play under Gus Malzahn.
Yeah, and I think, man, I'm excited to see what he does, the offensive coordinator, just because I think with everything that was going wrong on that team last year, I think Mike Norvell got a little distracted. I think he had a hard time focusing on what he could do to help that offense get going. Clearly, I mean, he could never find any solutions. And I think the fact that Gus Malzahn has the experience he has, he's got his offensive line coach Herb Hand, who's been with him for many years in the past, and they'll now have had that spring to really know what they have available to them. I look for them to come up with a good game plan to help those guys and to help the skill position guys also.
So looking at it real quick, we'll go down the line. I'll get you some sizes too on these players, the projected starters for Florida State. I think you're going to agree with me on these, Ira, but if you don't, feel free to speak up. Gunnar Hansen, 6'5", 330 pounds, in pencil or in ink as Florida State starting left tackle.
If he's healthy, I'm putting it in ink. Yeah. Okay.
Next up, we'll go with Micah Pettis, 6'7", 355. Those measurables are awesome, and he looks every bit of it. In pencil or in ink to be the starting right tackle for Florida State.
I'm going to put that in ink, and there's a little bit of concern because Pettis, both those guys were not available the whole time this spring. And so that's really the only, somebody asked me on our message boards on the Tribal Council the other day, why doesn't there seem to be more buzz about Pettis when they signed him? It was such a big deal. And I think the reason why is because, some of those guys weren't available much or in some cases at all in the spring. So there wasn't opportunities. Like you didn't hear people talking about them and how well they looked in practice because they weren't always available. Again, though, when you're talking about 5th-year, 6-year offensive linemen, I think if you look across the country, not a lot of 5th and 6-year offensive linemen are playing in practice in the spring because they're coming off an injury, they're getting healthy, and they've played so much football. This is unique because you're bringing them all to a new place, but I'm not that concerned about it, especially when I think about, those guys have played, like they've been at previous schools. Your past performance is a good predictor of what you're going to do in the future. Those guys played a ton in their previous schools. So I think Pettis will be here. I think he'll be accountable and ready to go. And I'd put him in pen also at right tackle.
All right. 29 career starts for Pettis. 22 career starts for Luke Pettibone. In pencil, in ink, or in blood, that he's going to be the starting center for Florida State.
We can put that one in blood. We can put that one in blood. I have no doubt. And again, I hope people, I want to keep conveying this. They love Luke Pettibone in a way that is not normal for a first year. I mean, a guy that just got on campus. I mean, they love that kid. And if you talk to anybody in that program, they are so excited, especially after, what just happened. And that position is so important. And that was what, even at the one scrimmage we were at, we just noted that the snaps were all good. The snaps were all on time. And again, I just think and having a smart center helps those other guys immensely. So yeah, well, I'll put that one in blood.
Pretty good height for Pettibone as well, 6'2" and 303 pounds. Now Adrian Medley, 19 starts, 26 games overall at UCF, 6'5", 305 pounds. Adrian Medley, pencil, ink, that he's going to be one of the 2 starting guards. And if so, do you like a specific side for him, or is it too early to tell?
Yeah, I'd probably say pencil, just because I think they're going to have some pretty good competition. I mean, they're really excited about Otto. You got Rizzi back, Richie Leonard back. Medley, to me, the fact that he had so many injuries earlier in his career, then he ended up starting for the last year and a half, basically. I think 16 games maybe he started the last couple of years at UCF. I don't know that I was blown away looking at his PFF numbers that he's going to be a slam dunk. I like the idea of him getting in there and playing because he seems like a real smart kid. He does know the offense and he is an experienced dude, but I don't know that he's a high level talent based on after all the injuries. So I'm going to leave that one in pencil. How about you?
All right. I think so, just because of the familiarity. I think push comes to shove, at least for the Alabama game. The offensive coordinator and the position coach know what they have in Medley, and so therefore having somebody that is like that, I think, wins a tiebreaker if it's close. But the combatants are as follows, and this is where it does get interesting. You've got redshirt senior Richie Leonard, who came back. Obviously, he was the Florida transfer from last year. He got hurt. Extremely athletic for the size that he carries. He's listed at 6'2", 327. Feels like he was a little bit heavier than that. At least he looked like it the way he played last year. Redshirt senior Jacob Rizzi, 6'5", 316. He was a center guard when he came in from the Ivy League. Bryson Estes, where does the time go? A redshirt senior there. Yeah. Can't believe that. Redshirt sophomore Andre Otto, 6'5", 325, and he's gotten praise in every camp he's been on campus at Florida State. Also, wicked smart young man, so that tracks. Usually the offensive line interviews are pretty smart. How do you make sense of that, Ira? If Medley is in pencil, your top contenders are Leonard, Otto, or is Rizzi or Estes maybe getting in that conversation?
Yeah, I'm going to put Leonard and Penn in one of the guard spots.
Okay.
I'm going to put Leonard and Penn at one of the guard spots, and I think you're going to have a free-for-all in the other one. I just think the fact that Leonard started, it looked like Leonard played well when he started that whole year at Florida. They were really excited about him coming in to last year. The whole line was a disaster. Then he got hurt early in the season. So I just don't think we can take anything that happened last year and put that on Richie Leonard. So I think there's a good chance he ends up being a guy in that starting lineup at guard. And then I think Medley and Otto and Rizzi battle it out. But the good thing is whoever wins it or doesn't win it, you've got some good options. I feel good about the 2 deep, on the interior of the offensive line. Little bit curious about the tackle, just the depth at tackle. That to me is probably my biggest concern is if anything does happen to Hansen or Pettis, you get really young in a minute, unless, now Rizzi played tackles at Harvard. I don't know if that equates or not. I think Medley's maybe played some tackles, so maybe you can make it work. They tried Otto at tackle in the past, so maybe you can make it work where you don't have to go to Lucas Simmons, Jonathan Daniels, one of those guys. But I do think in the interior of the offensive line, I think whoever doesn't win those starting jobs, you're going to have some really good backups, I think.